Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Mini Books Podcast with your host, Gloria and Rogan. And today we are excited to dive into Special Book with You. We picked this one because it has really important lessons to share, and we can't wait to talk about them. So let's get started.
Okay, so ready to dive into some serious self-motivation?
Let's do it.
We're tackling Steve Chandler's 100 Ways to Motivate Yourself today. And let me tell you, this is not your typical self-help stuff.
No kidding. This book is less about theory and more like Chandler just handing you a toolbox and saying, all right, let's get to work.
Right. Like, who's got time for 100 different things when you're trying to get stuff done?
Exactly.
So we're going to do a deep dive today and pull out some of the best, the stuff you can actually use like right now to boost that motivation.
Think of it as us distilling it down to the good stuff.
So one of Chandler's big ideas is this whole create your vision thing, instead of just waiting for it to happen. And it sounds kind of simple at first.
It does, but it's actually pretty powerful when you really think about it. It's like that story he tells about Arnold Schwarzenegger. Picture it. Early 80s, Arnold's just coming off his whole bodybuilding career, and he tells Chandler, point blank, I'm going to be the biggest box office star in Hollywood.
Okay, but even with Terminator coming out, you gotta admit, that's a pretty bold statement.
Totally. But that's Chandler's point. Arnold wasn't waiting for someone to tell him he could do it, or for the stars to align. He decided what he wanted and acted like it was already true.
So it's like this mental trick almost. Chandler calls it telling yourself a true lie, which I kind of love.
It is a bit like that. But it's not really about lying to yourself. It's more about shifting your perspective.
Yeah.
You go from passive to active, from waiting for things to happen to making them happen.
Okay, I'm with you. So you've got this clear vision, you're feeling pumped. Now how do we actually, get down to business?
Well, Chandler talks about sweating in peacetime so you bleed less in war, basically putting in the work up front so things are smoother later.
Love that.
He tells a great story about Little League. His buddy Rhett is practicing like crazy while everyone else is goofing off. Game day comes, and Rhett's cool as a cucumber, hitting those fastballs like it's nothing, while the other kids are freaking out.
Yeah, preparation is key. So whether you've got a big presentation coming up or you're trying to master some new skill, the more you put in beforehand, the less stressful the main event is.
Exactly. It's like that saying, the more you sweat in training, the less you bleed in battle.
Totally. But I think we've all been there where even with the best intentions, sometimes just thinking about all the things we need to do is overwhelming.
Oh, for sure. Totally.
Yeah.
And that's where Chandler's thing about simplifying your life and combining tasks is so smart. Our brains aren't really wired for multitasking as much as we like to think they are.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like we try to juggle a million things at once, but then we just end up stressed and less productive.
That's true.
Right?
Yeah, and Chandler has this great point about a CEO he knows who actually tackles his whole to-do list right away.
Really?
It sounds kind of crazy, but when you think about it, it's like no more mental clutter, just pure focus all the time.
I love that. No more of that lingering to-do list feeling. Just like imagine that feeling of a clean desk at the end of the day, but like all the time.
Exactly. And that ties into what we were saying about taking control of your energy, whether it's that clear vision, putting in the work up front, or just simplifying things. It's all about you being in the driver's seat.
Totally. But it can't be all work and no playwright. And Chandler talks about that too, about having fun and making work feel more like a game.
Oh, absolutely. He has this example of salespeople who treat their work like a giant chess match, which I thought was really interesting. They bring this intensity and strategy to what they're doing.
It's like they've found that sweet spot where even though it's work, it's also challenging and engaging.
Right. And that keeps them motivated.
I love that. So like instead of just going through the motions, what if we could find ways to make those everyday tasks, even the ones we dread, feel a little more like, well, a game?
Now you're getting it.
Yeah.
It's all about finding a fresh perspective, getting creative with it.
Totally. This is great stuff, but I'm thinking some people might be listening and feeling a little overwhelmed. Like, how do you go from feeling totally stuck to tackling your goals with, chess grandmaster energy?
That's where Chandler's idea of process goals is super helpful. Instead of freaking out about this huge goal, break it down into smaller, more manageable steps.
So instead of write a whole book, it's a write one page today.
Exactly. He talks about building a staircase. You don't get to the top by staring at the top step. You got to take it one step at a time.
I love that analogy. And it makes me think about how Most of us treat the last half hour of the workday just kind of drifting along, you know? What if we use that time, intentionally set a small, achievable goal just for that little chunk of time?
It's about building momentum, right? Stringing together those small wins, and suddenly you're making real progress.
And those small wins can be so motivating because starting is the hardest part, right?
Totally. Like that saying, a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step.
Mm-hmm.
But Chandler adds this whole other layer to it. He's saying even that first step can feel huge if you've been stuck for a while.
It's like breaking free from that feeling of being stuck, right? Proving to yourself that you can actually change things.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you guys. If you're enjoying this podcast, then don't forget to check out our official YouTube channel, Mini Books Podcast, and subscribe for more great podcasts like this one.
And what's cool is Chandler doesn't just tell you to take action. He actually gives you these tools to make it easier. Like, remember that part about promising the moon?
Oh, yeah. That's about setting those crazy big goals, the ones that almost seem impossible.
Exactly.
Huh.
He uses that example of Kennedy promising to put a man on the moon. I mean, at the time, that seemed insane, like something out of a movie. But that one big promise, it like lit a fire under everyone, and look what happened. We got one of the biggest achievements in human history.
So it's like setting the bar so high, you have no choice but to step up your game.
Right. And Chandler says, this promise the moon thing, it can work in our everyday lives too.
Yeah.
So instead of those tiny goals, what if we went big? Really big? Even if we don't get all the way there, we'll still have accomplished way more than we thought we could.
I love that. It's like giving ourselves permission to think bigger than we normally would.
It is. It's about getting out of your comfort zone, being a little uncomfortable even, but in a good way, and trusting that you've got what it takes, even if it feels a little scary at first.
I'm with you. So we're pushing ourselves, we're embracing those big, scary goals. What's next?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. Chandler ties all of this back to finding joy in the process. He's saying it's not just about the end goal, it's about enjoying the ride.
I love that.
Yeah. He talks about how our lives are like these novels we're writing, and we should approach them with that same kind of passion and excitement, and maybe a little curiosity too.
Totally.
And like any good novel, our lives are going to have ups and downs, plot twists, the whole works. But it's about embracing all of it, the good, the bad, even the messy parts, and trusting that it's all part of the story.
That's such a good point. So as we wrap up this deep dive into self-motivation, I think the key takeaway here is that there's no magic formula.
Nope.
It's not about some quick fix. It's bigger than that.
It's a way of life, really.
It's about making a choice to show up, to embrace your potential, and yeah, to find that joy in the journey.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And the best part is we all have that power within us. It's there. It starts with a single step, a single decision, a single moment where you choose yourself and the life you want to live.
So what will you choose today?
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this conversation and want to dive into more book insights and key learnings, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, Mini Books Podcast, and hit the notification bell so you never miss an episode. We're back every Sunday at 9 a.m. with new books and more to learn from. Until next time, take care, keep learning, and keep growing. Remember, this is Mini Books Podcast.